podcast, senior writer for Heavy.com, Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, your second time on the podcast. So first off, I want to say thank you. And how are you doing? How are you doing today?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be on the second time, and yeah, man, it's good to talk to you. Friend of Rashad and Dom is a friend of mine, so we're good to go.
Yes, sir. I'm so thankful to have them in my life, and just I've really value the importance of relationships, especially in this business, and just knowing who you associate yourself with, people that make you better, people that genuinely care about you. And I'm very fortunate and very grateful to have connected with you. I learn a lot from you. I learn quite a bit from you, actually, more than you probably know, just off of how you. I love the way you approach the business that you do, and so I'm very thankful to be in touch with you and learn from you.
Yeah, man, definitely. I feel the same way about you. I feel like I was just having this conversation with a colleague of mine. I think a lot of times people who are older are intimidated by people who are younger, and they don't want to help people who are younger. You can't help everybody, but you can pass on advice and you can be pleasant with people. And I think that oftentimes, you know, I'm young, but you're younger than me, and so I feel like at some point I am going to be older, and you're still going to be younger. And I feel like when you're young, when you're older, and you're able to impart wisdom or spend time or have conversation and dialogue, you want the younger generation to speak well of you. So to
Right.
me, it's important. I didn't always necessarily have that and on the industry side of things with people older than me. And so for me, one of my goals, not bitter, but I think one of my goals, when I was younger, when I recognized that was don't do that to the generation that's behind you. Make sure that you take the time.
Right. Well, I can certainly say I appreciate that. So I really do. So thank you very much. I want to dive right into it, though. Now, I know you're a busy man. Like I said, I know your Twitter's going crazy. You're breaking stories. You're going at it with Twitter toe to toe. So you're doing quite a bit. So anytime I can get you on, I certainly want to get right into it.
For sure.
All right. So the last time I spoke to you, your first appearance on the pod, we were talking about, wow, Adam Silver just pulled this off. We didn't even know if basketball was going to make a comeback. Obviously, COVID-19 still going on, but that was like right when it was at its peak as far as what is going on. Everything's in flux. And we're like, man, Adam Silver's did a great job. The aesthetics of it, having all the players buying into it, the bubble, and they pulled it off. They had a terrific postseason. Very entertaining, great games. Obviously, LeBron James repeats. Well, not repeats, but he wins with his third franchise. The passing of Kobe Bryant. It just seemed like everything was falling in place the way we all wanted it to fall in place. So for you, what did you take away from the bubble? What are some things that you liked about it? What were some things you think maybe they could have done better? What was your overall experience from your perspective of the bubble?
I didn't agree with it at first. COVID is unprecedented in the sense of we've never had a pandemic of this magnitude stop everything. You got to wear a mask to the grocery store. You got to wear a mask to the bank. As a black man, I never thought I'd see the day where I could walk into the bank with a mask on and not get stopped by the cops. When I look at just all of that, so when you look at basketball and how it's played and the socialization of it and everything that goes with it, um, I didn't see the vision. And I mean, when you look at it, um, I really think that this coming NBA season there should be multiple bubbles. I don't think that there should be arenas this season. I just think that there are a lot of variables, particularly with traveling. And everybody is not going to hold the principles of a pandemic in the same vein that maybe you, I, or others do. You even see it in your day-to-day life, people going outside without masks on. It's not really about you, it's about the other people. And so when you look at what the bubble was during the 2019-2020 season, I think it was perfect in the sense of there were no cases that we know about. B, I think, if the NBA didn't salvage the season, we'd be talking about a loss of $2 billion. and really and truly, it gave many people at home something to look forward to. I live on the East Coast. You're out in the South in Florida. So for me, me being on the East Coast, there's no beach at this point. I remember Labor Day weekend going to the beach. I'm like, yeah, this is about to be the end of the beach and everybody's home. And I feel like, once, Labor Day and, going into October hit, it gave an East Coaster like myself. I double as a person who covers the NBA, but also actually grew up a fan of the NBA who likes basketball. So for me, it was work, but also it was enjoyable. And for other people who are simply fans, on the East Coast, it gave them something to look forward to at large. In a way that I was hoping football would take the baton and do the same thing, but it's only on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays.
Right, right.
And I think that's why it's so vital going into, this month and beyond, having a season, because it gives people something to be entertained, to look forward to in an era where many people can't go to the movies at large. So I think the NBA did a good job with the bubble. The only thing that I think was a critique probably was, players that I talked to, the food at first, but then the food ended up being okay.
Yeah, I heard about it. Like that's to that be the only criticism we really hear is just about the food. I mean, that seems pretty good.
Yeah, the food, but they got better over time. I think I don't really have a criticism. I think it exceeded my expectations. I think the unknown is what was solved. No cases
Right.
of COVID. And I'll add that I think when I look at COVID at large, when it first happened in March, side note, a lot of COVID babies will be born this month.
100%, 100%.
But I'll add that when I look at COVID at large, it reminds me a lot of when Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive, in the sense of, I feel like when Magic first came out and said that he was HIV positive, people were saying, well, is it the gay man's disease? These were things that were said. Did it come from Africa? Did it come from monkeys? Did it come, we didn't know? And I think what made HIV really stand out was that you had a prominent athlete who was on the top of his game, had to retire because of that. And so then when you saw all of those players who had COVID, like Kevin Durant, Marcus Smart, and some others, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, like, athletes aren't supposed to be weak, or athletes aren't supposed to be sick. Athletes are supposed to be seen as juggernauts and superhuman. And so I was around when Magic Johnson announced that he, was HIV positive, and was young, but I understood, what was going on. It just reminded me of that two different ailments. But I think we've learned a lot since March about
Right.
the disease. We're still learning. And I just think that just we're dealing with science, we're dealing with finances, we're dealing with science, we're dealing with technology, we're dealing with a vicious news cycle, all through the process of a sport. That's a lot. I know you asked me one question. I've given you like 20 different topics, but
No. Okay, hold on. Your audio went out. Keep going.
I definitely think, when it's all said and done, though, there will be basketball. I'm just a little apprehensive about this coming season.
Okay, and I was going to save that. I want to get into that. A couple things you touched on. That's a very interesting way you put that, and I never thought of it from that perspective, as far as the element of the unknown. And when Magic Johnson announced that, like, to your point, everyone's like, "Whoa, like, what is that?" I remember? Obviously, I'm much younger, so I have to look at some of the interviews now, and like just being a fan of the game. And I remember some of the interviews where they didn't know if they could be on the same team. Can we touch the same basketball? Can we, like, that was a concern. And it was that element of unknown just shocked people. And COVID initially had that shock. And like when we saw the first case, I think was Rudy Gobert and in Utah. And then we're like, whoa, Rudy Gobert has it. And then, so then it was like, I remember Mark Cuban was on the sidelines with the Dallas Mavericks game. They're like, hey, what do you, this COVID situation? And he was like, wait, I don't even know. Like, it just took everybody, the element of surprise just had everybody. And then I remember Tom Hanks had it. And so it's like, okay, now these super figures in society, like you said, athletes that are put on this pedestal as superheroes, and now you're getting the richest celebrities, all these people are getting it. And it was the element of shock. So that's a very interesting way you put that.
Yeah, I on the Heavy Live with Scoop B show a couple months ago, I had Emmanuel Mudiay on the show, and we talked about COVID and just what that Jazz locker room was like.
Wow.
And it was funny because the symptoms were different. Like what he had, and I don't want to misquote. I'm trying to remember because so much stuff has happened since then. But
right
in our conversation, I remember Gobert having it. The way Emmanuel told me, if I recall, it was Gobert had it. Then Mudiay had flu-like symptoms, but I don't think it was that. I think that's how it went. But like him with flu-like symptoms felt worse than Gobert did, who had it, if I'm recalling correctly. So it's like even within the process of COVID, like I have friends who have contracted it, gotten over it, and then having conversation with them. Everybody's situation is different.
Yeah. That's what makes it so hard to understand and to handle as a whole. It's so hard to just to get a group full of people. I mean, how hard is it just to get 3 friends to hang out sometimes? You think of schedules and agendas. Now trying to get the whole country to do something and all agree upon it on one way, it's like tug of war. Some people, hey, I'm not showing any symptoms, I'm fine. And then other people are, hey, no, my father just passed from this. You need to take this seriously. So to your point, it's so hard to get a pulse on something when so many people handle it differently or respond to it differently. But the bubble happened. It was a success. The aesthetics were very pleasing. The virtual fans, at first I'm like, I don't really know, but okay, we'll see. And then all of a sudden, Lil Wayne, you have Shaq's in the crowd. Obama was in the crowd at one point. It was terrific. And then you get to the NBA draft. And before we dive into NBA free agency, because that's what I really want to get your take on a lot of things there. I was on SUV TV, a part of Sports Talk 2319 with Rashad Phillips. You had Daryl. You had... What?
I know that guy.
Oh, yeah. You know that guy. Yeah, smart. Yeah, my guy, Zach Ramey. So we had a phenomenal draft shows in Atlanta. And I was like, I'm really interested. Of course, we broke down the 60 prospects. And I'm like, man, I think the Nuggets stole the draft because they had really high on RJ Hampton. It felt like the rich getting richer. Kyra Lewis going to the Pelicans. They just lost Drew Holiday. Tyrell Terry to the Mavs. Like, there were so many hidden gems in this draft. But I was really interested as far as the presentation of it because I thought Roger Goodell and the NFL did an amazing job for their draft. What were your takeaway from that? Because it seems like this is the year of adapting. This is the year of just trying to make things work. Not everything's going to be perfect, but it's being aggressive and it's trying. What was your takeaway on the draft? Did you feel they did a really good job on it? Was there some things that, hey, they did the best they could?
I liked both drafts, actually. I like the NBA draft. I like the NFL draft. The NBA draft was in studio at ESPN on the campus of ESPN. Have you ever been to ESPN's campus?
Never been. I've been on Fox Sports, but never ESPN's.
And I visited ESPN's campus in 2007. Chris Broussard took me there.
Wow.
He was there years ago, and I remember he came to my parents' house, picked me up because I was in school. I was in college. I came home that weekend. We drove to the Bristol campus. I stayed at Connecticut that weekend, and like their kitchen is crazy. Like steaks, like chefs in there. They have like a candy station where you could like put bags of candy to take it with you and snack on the campus. Like I sat in on Baseball Tonight meetings. This was like springtime, so like baseball was going on. I remember meeting Fernando Vina. there. Chris did a NBA Fast Break show with at the time Swing Cash was still in the WNBA. She was co-hosting with him, so I sat in on like production meetings,
Like a kid.
literally, and like I learned a great deal about just that Bristol culture. So like, yeah, I was there because I was writing a feature story on Chris, but at the same time, like I got a tour and I was an undergrad, so it gave me a perspective. I've been in other stations, but ESPN to me in Bristol, they got to get set up over there. But so when I was actually watching the draft, in my mind, I'm like thinking, this was years ago when I went, but thinking like, I wonder if the cafeteria is open. Like, I wonder, like I'm thinking about all that stuff. Like, I wonder, like, you know, did Commissioner Silver fly into, you know, to Bristol, or did the car service pick him up? Did he drive himself? Like, all those things I'm asking myself because I've been there. But then at the same point, like, the actual process of just, you know, him walking up to the podium and you know, in the studio, and then, you know, it felt like I was thinking about times covering the draft at Barclays Center, Brooklyn, and just not hearing the yelling fans and how much fans really are a makeup of a genetic makeup and fabric and the thread and the fabric of sports. Like, that's the person who's really suffering, and so you supplement that by you can't pump in crowd noise during a draft. You can with games. And you know, it's funny. I was having a conversation with a broadcaster yesterday about in football how much the game presentation looks good on TV, but how much is going into behind the scenes to giving you as much of a simulated field or a simulated game as possible, and that it's they're doing the best they can, but from what you're used to perspective, blah.
Right.
You know, and not to say they're not thankful for a job, it's just different, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, I think we're all just trying to make it through 2020. I still do think that, you know, the next 6 months are going to be very interesting in the new year, particularly as a new administration is coming in, and the thought process and the priority is on safety and masks, versus the administration that's currently there. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that the new administration, in conjunction with sports, in conjunction with a potential vaccine, in conjunction with the thought process of fans eventually coming back, takes place. It's a lot. I know Rome wasn't built in a day is always the go-to, but I think the new go-to should be COVID wasn't solved in a year.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's a really good point. It's so hard when you have so many different variables, and that's a great point. The new administration that affects sports, that really does. Very quickly, it's so funny you brought up Chris Broussard. So when I was at Fox Sports, Rashad took me there, and he was making a guest on The Herd, Colin Cowherd. So I was a kid in the candy shop. I'm like, even just looking at the robot in the lobby, I'm like, that's the robot that I see on NFL Sundays. So I was like, man, that's the robot. So then Chris Broussard comes out, and he was familiar with some of my work, and he took the time to really get to know me. And when I went to The Odd Couple, Rob Parker, Chris Broussard, and Rashad Phillips was a guest there. And this meeting changed my life. It wasn't a meeting for me. Rashad was just a guest, and did a phenomenal job on their show. And afterwards, this is his time. This isn't about me. So I'm just a kid in the candy shop learning from the best. And Chris Broussard and Rob Parker are like, hey, come in. So I was like, okay. So I come in. He's like, so tell me about yourself. And I had the opportunity to explain what I do, my passion, my interest, to the top people in the field. And they didn't need to take that time to learn me and to know me. And since then, Rob and I are very close. We talk very often. Chris Broussard has reached out and helped me a lot. So to your point, that's just so funny how Chris Broussard reached out and he helped you. He did the same. And to what we talked about earlier in the podcast, just the ability of people picking other people up when you've made it to a certain point is something incredible, because it's something that doesn't show up on a stat sheet, Scoop. It's just something that's it's an intangible that very few have, but I'm very grateful for.
And it's funny because Chris said to me years ago. It's funny. I met Chris as a kid when I was doing radio with the Nets. I was in the locker room with him and Woj and Fred Kerber from the New York Post, Stephen A. Smith. These were all these guys who were writers, and but the funny thing is, Jamel Hill reconnected us. This was in 2007.
Wow.
I had met Jamel in Florida, in St. Petersburg at a this thing called Pointer Institute. It's in St. Pete, and I had known Jamel here and there. Like I knew Jamel. We would see each other in passing. This was before Jamel became the Jamel Hill, but like this was when she was still a columnist and she was living in Orlando.
Right.
And she reconnected Chris and I via email, and Chris told me he said, call me. And I thought that was pretty significant. It was crazy because on Heavy Level Scoop B, like I sat down with Jamel about 2 months ago, and I'm saying that to say, over the course of that time when Chris and I got cool, he said to me, make sure that the same way that I took time with you or helped you or mentored you, you extend that same courtesy, grace, and time with the people who come behind you. So, this is a full circle moment. This is very circular, the way that you and I are talking.
Right. And I wish more people would think that way, not even just about in our business, but in life, and just open the door for somebody, just asking how their day was before you talk about what's on your mind. That type of mentality, I think it goes a long way. Scoop. So let's fast forward to NBA free agency. I did 2 models, and a while back, one recent. I said, like, there's 5 categories that smart franchises, smart people do, and that's be aggressive, you work hard, you're ahead of the curve, you take risks, and you separate yourself. And so that was like my model. And often the Warriors would check that, the Patriots would check that. You get to just really well-run organizations do that. And then I did another model, and the model was, I believe that a relationship, a personality that a player in the city have is important. For example, Shaq was a little too big for Orlando. Shaq's personality fit Los Angeles perfectly. The lights, the glamour, the high personality. Somebody like Giannis, believe it or not, I think his personality suits Milwaukee. Giannis isn't necessarily about big outlandish personalities, more of I want to grind and I'm focused on basketball. And Milwaukee's a little bit more low key. So I think personalities matter to the city that they're in. So for you, what were your biggest takeaways from this free agency? I'll dive into specifics. Like for me, I think the Lakers won it. I think Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, Wesley Matthews, we know that list. I think the Atlanta Hawks won it with Gallinari, Bogdanovich. The Trailblazers may not have the sexiest pickup, the sexiest, biggest player, but Robert Covington is someone that they needed. Derek Jones is someone they needed, that wing that can play defense. Obviously, you have the dynamic backcourt. So for you, what were some big takeaways from you? Some losses, some interesting pieces that were moved, teams that won?
Philadelphia 76ers also won.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list as well. Yeah, can't beat that.
I think when you look at what Philly was able to do, I think this past season was a down year because I think Brett Brown stayed too long. But I think it was also a down year because personality-wise, Brett ended up becoming the villain because he didn't get along. He wanted a certain type of athlete within his rotation.
Right.
And while I think Jimmy Butler benefited or bettered the Sixers the season before this one that just ended were better with Jimmy and JJ than they were this past season. And I think they overpaid for Al Horford significantly.
Right.
And I think that, but Al Horford was the Band-Aid, was the Band-Aid on a bullet wound with Vaseline in it. And you got to pull out the bullet. And the bullet, I think at some point was the players stopped responding to Brett Brown. But the crazy part about it was when you look at you look at what Ben Simmons did this season in the playoffs, specifically when they moved him to the 4 and moved Shake Milton to the point, essentially that's what the Sixers were doing the year before in half-court sets during the game. Now, starting the game where Jimmy was running the flow of the offense and allowing Ben Simmons to move off the ball.
Right.
And I feel as though I think I would have liked to have seen the Sixers find a way to get Chris Paul, because I think Chris Paul in Philly would have just blown them out the water, but it didn't happen. I still like what Philly did. I like Danny Green in Philly because I don't think he's going to – I mean, Philly fans are rough. LA fans are rough, but I do think – I mean, he shot 36% on catch and shoots last season.
And Seth as well.
Yes, and I think that you fill the void that was missed by J.J. Redick.
Right.
If you really think about it, the 76ers were a Kawhi Leonard bucket away from into the finals potentially.
Right.
So then you go into the offseason and you lose Jimmy Butler. So they had to really give a remake to that situation. I also do like Dwight Howard in Philadelphia because they filled him in Philly. They're giving him the opportunity in Philly that he ultimately wanted to re-sign with in LA. He wanted to close games. Anthony Davis was closing games in Los Angeles, but at the 5 position. The White was not closing games at the 5 position, but I think he raised his value in Los Angeles. And I think that assuming the Sixers do well this season, his value will be much higher the next season.
Right. Now, how is he supposed to close games when he's alongside a guy with like Embiid? Now you just play massive big ball? Is that the solution?
To me, I think Embiid's natural position was always the power forward position. They choose.
Really?
That's my opinion. I don't look at Joel Embiid as a 5. I look at Joel Embiid as a 4. Just like I've never looked at Giannis as a 4, I've looked at Giannis as a 3.
Okay. All right. So you're okay with playing that type of ball where obviously you're going to have a massive size advantage. Free throws late in the game may be a concern, but defensively you're a juggernaut in the paint with those two late in games.
I look at Karl Towns as a 4, not a 5. So, I think
right.
You think that the skill set of DeAndre Ayton, Joel Embiid, and Karl Anthony Towns are more 4-like than Giannis at the 4.
Agreed.
But to me, I'm also a basketball. I guess I'm considered old school now, but like I look at Giannis Antetokounmpo as an upgraded version of Kenyon Martin with LeBron James dribble and a better jumper.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. And his ferociousness attacking the rim, that aggressive play. Yeah.
Yeah, like I like if you're gonna make a 25th anniversary of a Jordan shoe, the Jordan 11 shoe, the days of Stromile Swift and Kenyon Martin have evolved, and it's created Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, that's nasty. You brought up Giannis, so I want to get into this with you. It's a great transition to this. So Giannis, I believe, because he hasn't re-signed yet, is going to stay with Milwaukee. That's just my opinion. Now, you and I talked about this the first time you were on, and you brought up how the Heat are contenders. You can never count out Golden State. I've seen things like I've always said, why isn't Dallas talked about? I mean, no state tax, great owner, great coach, superstar in Luka. I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas lands somebody big. I'm not saying they will land Giannis, but I think it's a possibility. I think he resigns though. But what are these rumors? Can you tell me? Because I know you have a lot of insight within the league. There's these not necessarily rumors, but Anthony Davis is waiting to sign because he wants to see if there's an opportunity for them to get Giannis in 2021. Like we believe Anthony Davis is going to stay with the Lakers, but it's like the how much, it's the minute details of his contract that could help persuade Giannis to come in 2021. Is that outlandish? Was that something that just kind of got brought up that, okay, hey, yeah, there's no evidence behind that. Nothing's backing that. Or is that something that you could see as a realistic possibility?
Of him going to Dallas?
No, well, Dallas, but also the Lakers, because they were talking about Anthony Davis's contract.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because back in 2018, I had put out a report and used the word confirmed, and I should not have, but it was relating to Kevin Durant. And even back then in 2018, what you're seeing now with LeBron and his contract extension with the Lakers,
Right.
what you're seeing is the transition for post LeBron while LeBron is here. And so the Lakers were always looking for a third star. KD, there was a thought process that KD would potentially be that guy. Now, Giannis has always been whispered about. I mean, certain things are there. You know, his brother is playing for that Lakers team, Costas, but also his former head coach is an assistant coach with the Lakers, and Jason Kidd.
Right.
I think that you talked about team and personality. The Lakers fit LeBron.
Absolutely.
The Lakers fit AD. When you look at Giannis, there are a few teams that fit his personality, but his skill set fits with a lot of teams.
A lot of teams.
To me, Dallas would fit because they've had Dirk. Not comparing him to Dirk, just saying a dynamic forward.
Right, right.
Who, to me, was a finesse tall four with 3 capabilities, and as he got older, shifted to the 5. When I look at Giannis, he is going through growing pains similar to both Dirk and LeBron. But Giannis is just so damn good. And I think his talent and skill set, he was more sure of himself at a younger age than I think Dirk was. European player. The only difference is you forget Giannis is European because he's black. You attribute European to white.
Right.
So that's a whole separate dichotomy, I think. But I think when it goes to LeBron and his talent, his first stint in Cleveland, he was good. Miami made him great.
Taught him how to win.
Yeah. And so when I look at Giannis and Dallas, I just remember Dallas, like when Martin Cuban came into the fold as the owner, guys raving about how much he took care of them, like PlayStations in their locker. I remember that was flat screens in their locker. Their players' lounge was top notch. Just all of those things. He's easily accessible, right? So then I look at Luka. I look at Porzingis. Like I look at those things, and then I look at how they upgraded. James Johnson is in the system. Like, you know, they went and they got goons, so to speak, you know, in the offseason. I think this team, Porzingis is a player that when he's healthy will do well. But I think if you were to add Giannis to the fold, would be great. However, I look at the Raptors. I had this conversation with a buddy of mine last night that works in that's affiliated with basketball deeply. And the thing that I said to them was, in Toronto, Vince Carter was the placebo, but Kawhi Leonard was the experiment, the actual experiment. Because he had the country behind him, he had the city behind him, and he was in and out. I feel from a perspective of Kawhi being from California, him actually being able to play at home. Toronto's where he ended up, and he made it work for him. If Giannis were in a situation where he could go, there's nothing I've heard. I'm just speaking loudly. If he were to go to a situation with Toronto, he's a European brand that played in Milwaukee that goes to Toronto. He's already has the European brand. then you add the Canadian brand, and you're playing for an American entity in the NBA. It's different. And so I think Toronto would make sense. You look at the Warriors, um, they make plausible sense too, in the sense of um, preparing for the next. Like, if you're looking to contend and play at that next, the Warriors can't depend on Draymond and Klay Thompson forever, because now Klay's gotten hurt twice.
Yep.
He can still shoot, but you need a KD, the next KD type of player in that system. And so to me, Golden State would make sense too. But you also got to sit and think. Like, Giannis met with the Bucks' brain trust back in around Labor Day weekend, and I reported, he met with, the brain trust. His mother was with him. His brother was there. In the offseason, I'm told that Chris Paul and James Harden were two guys that, he expressed that he wanted to team up with in Milwaukee. However, Giannis is dealing with the same problem that LeBron was dealing with in Cleveland in his first stint. Nobody was trying to come to play in Cleveland.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It seems like full circle. You got a guy who's unstoppable, who the team clearly, like, this is, I compare the Milwaukee Bucks to George Foreman. Like, the left hook is coming, but if it lands, you're done. Like, we know it's the Giannis train, but you need a well-rounded boxer. You need a jab. You need a cross. You need to have footwork. They need to have more elements to support him. And so that's ultimately why LeBron left, because what you were getting with Cleveland. Okay, he's the best player in the league, but you know what you're getting. So people like Boston were able to beat him. And now it's like you see the same thing with Milwaukee and Giannis. And so that's why it's so interesting when you see, to your point, I never thought about that Toronto perspective. That makes a lot of sense the way you broke it down there. Dallas, I always said that, which is Mark Cuban, the coach, no state tax, Luka. And then, of course, the Warriors being aggressive, always doing something that no one's expecting. And then the Lakers just always seem to be getting the mix because it is the number one brand in basketball. Let's transition to this before I let you go. There's two last things. I appreciate your time, Scoop. Brooklyn. It's been very interesting in Brooklyn. So I remember I'm studying the night before the draft show. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this may break when we're on air. Like I didn't know what to expect. James Harden wants to go there, but he wants out of Houston. But does KD really want James Harden for Kyrie Irving? Is Houston is the Fertitta brothers going to do any of that trade? So what is that whole situation like? What has your intel told you? Your sources? Do you have any insight on that whole situation? What's going on in Brooklyn? What's going on with James Harden? Do you see a trade coming to fruition, or how are things going to play out?
I mean, James Harden did formally request a trade. He turned down the $50 million or the extension, whatever that was.
Yeah.
There are a mixture of things. One, on the Houston side, from what I'm told, Russell Westbrook did not want to play for Tillman Fertitta for various reasons. This was, last month. A lot of it had to do with political alignment. A lot of it had to do with the fact, even going back further with D'Antoni not signing an extension, wanting out, Daryl Morey ultimately leaving. But also, as it relates to Houston, you kind of saw the writing on the wall a couple of years earlier when Houston began to take Mike D'Antoni's coaching staff away.
Right.
Or Roland, was let go. And other guys. Or Roland is the trainer of James Harden as well, and he doubled as a player development coach. So you had that. But then I look at the relationship between Harden and Durant as unfinished business. Like, I know Serge Ibaka had interest in, signing with Brooklyn. He ultimately went with the Clippers. Marc Gasol left and went to the Lakers. When I look at the Nets at large, as you know, I'm very dialed in onto the happenings of Mr. Irving. Folks that I've spoken with felt at first that trade, like when it was a Saturday night when it was guy in Sports Illustrated Farbod had tweeted that there was interest in a potential trade, and then I know in Brooklyn That there were talks that kind of expanded. Folks that I have spoken with on the Kyrie Irving side felt that, as us young folks would say, it was cap. Felt as though they didn't see it happening. But I did some research on the Houston side, and Harden did, from what I understand, wanted out of Houston, requested a trade. Brooklyn and Houston did speak, but on the Nets side, they weren't trying to give up Kyrie.
Right.
And on the Brooklyn side, if to make a move, it would have to include Caris LeVert and potentially Jared Allen. Caris LeVert was a contentious conversation back at the trading deadline back in February as it related to a potential Drew Holiday move. And as I reported back in the fall, early fall, the Nets did have some sort of conversation with the Pelicans as it related to Spencer Dinwiddie. But that, basically, Drew Holiday was also on the wish list of Milwaukee, Golden State, Philadelphia. And he had ultimately went to the Milwaukee Bucks.
Right.
But the biggest thing is now is that when you look at the Nets and you look at Spencer Dinwiddie, when you look at Caris LeVert, there are people who feel that he is the third star. And I think that Brooklyn is kind of in a similar situation that the Lakers were in last season as it related to the third star conversation. It's Kyle Kuzma, that third star. I think after watching him with LeBron this year, as opposed to the season before without Anthony Davis, Kuzma to me is in a similar situation that Brandon Ingram is in. Brandon Ingram plays better without a ball-dominant guy like LeBron. Not to say that's a bad thing.
No, right.
Different. Like Dwayne Wade was able to flow in rhythm with LeBron. Kyrie Irving at point guard was often shifted over to the two. You look at a situation with Boobie Gibson in Cleveland. Boobie often, although he was a point guard, he became a catch and shoot point guard. And I feel like when you look at Brooklyn, Caris LeVert scored 50 points without KD and Kyrie in the lineup against the Celtics.
Yeah.
I think you're either going to see one of two things. One, Caris is going to continue to raise his value and play his way into other teams looking at him as a star, or he's going to win a championship with Kyrie and KD at some point. It's going to be one of two things.
Okay. So yeah, he's that equal piece right there. He's that guy.
Yeah, I think ultimately Kuzma and Caris are in very similar situations.
That's great. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. But I think, obviously those guys are going to show up to training camp. I know that the Boston Celtics had inquired, as I reported, during that week of the trade moratorium being lifted, the draft, and then free agency all in that week. That was a crazy week. But I think that when you look at just what is going on as it relates to Brooklyn, I do also like the Landry Shamet piece. The Landry Shamet piece, I think, is severely underrated because I think you need a shooter off the bench or a shooter that's a bench player that you can actually start. Like, I think there's the possibilities are endless with Shamet, and I think the Nets are going to run. Like, you got Joe Harris and Landry Shamet who are both shooters.
And you got Dinwiddie, and you got LeVert, and you got Kyrie, and you got KD. Jared Allen's a big who can move his feet. They're nasty. They're young. They're lanky. They're dynamic. They're going to run up and down. So, Scoop, I appreciate your time for just everything we talked about earlier. So my last thing I'm going to ask you, going into the next season, I've been a strong advocate of an NBA shortened season. I think it adds a sense of urgency. It's healthier for the players. Obviously, there's stipulations and things and like just so many things to make that come to fruition. So for it to finally happen, obviously not under the circumstances that they probably wanted as far as COVID making that happen, we're getting that. And so now early predictions for this season coming up. As to your point, we're going to have a new administration, so who knows what happens and how that affects sports. But let's just say we get through the whole season. Who is your early preseason pick to win it all and your MVP?
The Los Angeles Lakers to win it all again, to repeat.
Agreed.
LeBron James is the MVP.
Finals or regular season?
I think LeBron becomes the finals. LeBron becomes the regular season MVP. Anthony Davis becomes the finals MVP.
Wow. Now, why do you think he's going to get it in year 18? I know I said that's the last question, but like my early pick is a Trae Young. I could see an AD getting it, but why LeBron in his 18th year? Even though I think he could get it and he should get it, I thought he should have gotten it this year. I think Michael Jordan should have always gotten it, but sometimes Karl Malone got it. Why do you feel that the media will give it to LeBron this year when there's so many years prior they could have given it to him? What's going to change this year for them to do that?
Because I think that while Giannis had the stats and deserved it, we're getting into LeBron in that Michael Jordan phase of life where there's so many years he could have won it. And I think that because he was slighted this past season and Giannis didn't even make it to the finals, I kind of feel like there's going to be a level of extra eyes on him, LeBron, this season because he didn't get it. I think there is a psychological portion of it, and I also think there's a numbers portion of it. I also think LeBron is playing, from my perspective, just at looking at rosters, LeBron plays on a better team now.
Right. You know, there's a lot to consider when you go with an MVP, and he's pretty much checking all the boxes on which that would line him up for. Scoop B, I appreciate your time. Like always, please, for everyone listening, where can they find you? Where can they listen to your show, social media, the whole 9 yards?
Follow me on Twitter at ScoopB. That's where you get information about shows, links, all that other stuff. Instagram, Scoop_B. You can see the lifestyle there. Snapchat as well, Scoop_B. And subscribe to the Scoop B Radio podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn app, Stitcher app, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or simply by visiting scoopbradio.com. We average between 2 to 3 million streams annually. We've had anybody from Charles Barkley, Shaq, Kenny Smith, to the voice of Siri. People. And then I'm a senior writer at heavy.com, so check out my written work. And yeah, man, always a pleasure to converse with you, and you keep doing your thing, Mr. Jean Jacket Man.
I appreciate it. Will do, Scoop. Thank you very much. Be safe, and until next time.
Yes, sir.